Good morning and welcome to K24 this morning. My name is Jeff Mote. Karibu sana. Took a brief break, was a bit under the weather, but we're back in the saddle. And of course, quite a story that we need to unpack and discuss and look at the way forward as far as this is concerned. News coming from the Ministry of Education in terms of reopening of schools. This happening next Monday. Very many parents talking about the fact that they were found essentially flat-footed on this one. Very many thought that the academic calendar had come to a stall and they'd resume learning next year. Things have since changed on this one, and even as this directive is given, we discuss this and dig a bit deeper to find out really how this can be rolled out best way possible on that, and that really makes the front pages for all your dailies this morning. Karibu sana. Let's look at the front page of our People Daily even as we get into this. Front page of the People Daily: packed diary, March exams as schools open. Grade 4, Form 4 and Class 8 are the first group expected back in class on Monday, with Education CS Magoha determined to have all learners back before end of year. As you can see right there, it's not a matter of if but when, especially from the Ministry of Education giving the directives on how this will essentially roll out. You can find that story as well in your copy of your People Daily on the front page therein. Also on the front page, the PD: arrest those behind Murang'a chaos, Ruto tells police. DP claims security officials know the perpetrators of the chaos that transpired in Murang'a over the weekend. You can get the details of that right there. Also in your PD, how politicians are putting lives in grave danger. You can find the details of that particular story in there as well. And let's look at that. President asks Kenyans to emulate the force's efficiency and professionalism in service delivery, hailing the military ethics in terms of what they've done so far. Of course, key in point, Major General Badi as far as the Nairobi Metropolitan Service is concerned. And that story is on page 7 of your People Daily. In case you don't have your physical copy of your PD, you can get it straight to your phone. It's only 10 shillings. The number that you dial is star 550 star 4 hash. Once again, the number is star 550 star 4 hash. Dial that number and get yourself a copy of your People Daily straight to your phone. It's brought to you by the People Daily and Safaricom. And right here on the show, for the first 10 lucky winners, if the first to send us your screenshot of your e-paper, your name and where you're watching from, you get yourself 250 shillings worth of airtime, all courtesy of Safaricom and the PD. So take a screenshot of your e-paper, send it to the WhatsApp number at the bottom of the screen with your name and where you're watching from, and we'll send you 250 shillings worth of airtime. Once again, all courtesy of the People Daily and Safaricom. Let's move right along to the front page of the Daily Nation now. The holiday is over, and when you look at that picture, it's a picture telling 1,000 words indeed. Back to school. 2020 will not be a lost year after all. Children troop back to class from Monday, signaling the government's determination to avoid class repetitions, which would have created a messy backlog in the education system. Parents caught off guard by the announcements have 5 days to raise school fees. Of course, it's been a trending joke online that parents, quote-unquote, ate the school fees, weren't ready to pay fees for 2020. Well, here they are with this particular scenario as learning resumes on the 12th of October. And that story is on the front page of the Daily Nation. Also in the Daily Nation, Ruto: how state plans to block my campaign. Of course, he's asked police officers not to be used by different elements, politically speaking. And of course, in the Daily Nation, they are getting into matters that could be state-sponsored campaigns to get him away from being on the ballot in 2022. That story is on page 6 of your Daily Nation this morning. Now the front page of the Standard: what new school calendar means. Candidates back to class on Monday as ministry races against time to save academic year disrupted by coronavirus in March. Very many questions being asked, not only for those getting back to school now, but what happens to the rest of the classes? When do they resume? Is there a protocol as to how this is rolled out? Very many questions as far as this is concerned, and you can find that story and the details of that in your copy of your Standard. The Standard talking about key indicators that they'll be looking at: transition, no mass repetitions, all learners move to next class, double exams in 2020 class seats, final exams in March next year, while 2021 finalists take tests in December. Still trying to deal with what could be a potentially, as they've called it, messy backlog in terms of classes and repetitions. Other classes likely to report end of this month upon review of COVID-19 trend. Short Christmas, students to break for 1 week in December. And in terms of the timeline, of course, as we've heard right there, grade 4, class 8 and Form 4 report on Monday. The 2021 calendar to start in May. More details of that as well in your copy of your Standard this morning. So as you can see, this is really front and center as far as it's concerned. They start taking a different angle. 10-day Xmas break for teachers and learners. No midterm. KCPE and KCSE candidates to sit exams between March 22nd and April 16th, 2021. Jobless, cash-strapped parents given less than a week to raise fees. How do they move forward? How do they make sense of this? Of course, yes, Magoha has time and time again spoken about the fact that no child will be chased home because of lack of fees. But the proof of that, of course, is always in the pudding. You can get the details of that in your copy of your Star as well. So front and center, really, one big story we'll be discussing right here. We'd love your feedback and your thoughts and comments, even as we move through this particular discussion this morning. Welcome to the show. This is K24 This Morning. And like I said, of course, your thoughts and feedback are absolutely invaluable on the show. The WhatsApp number is at the bottom of the screen. And we have a question for you, even as we embark on this particular discussion. Because yes, there's that angle of fees. Where will the parents get the money to get the children back in school? But there's also a safety question that very many parents have, even as they send their children back to school. Let's have that question up on screen now. What additional measures should the government put as schools reopen when it comes to safety? What additional safety measures should the government put as schools reopen? We'd love to hear from you. You can send us your feedback to the WhatsApp number at the bottom of the screen. What additional measures should the government put as schools reopen as far as safety is concerned? Because at the end of the day, it really is a key issue, and that's why the children stayed home that long. The president had also said they won't endanger the lives of these children. So what additional safety measures should the government put as schools reopen? Send us your WhatsApp message at the bottom of the screen. We'll be sampling those messages as we continue with the show. But as always, let's set the stage. Now, it's back to school for candidates in primary and secondary schools after directive from the Ministry of Education for Grade 4, Class 8 and Form 4 students to resume learning in 5 days' time. The sudden action comes shortly after final year students resumed learning at universities and colleges, with the end goal being salvaging the lost time as well as tackling the national examination set for March next year.
In 5 days' time, parents, grade 4 students as well as primary and secondary school candidates should be economically and psychologically prepared to resume learning after a 7-month paralysis in the education sector. Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha, in a statement issued earlier today, directed the resumption of education for a section of students in line with a new education calendar, a decree that has caught many off guard.
Tuna haso chifu ndio anatusaidia chakula ya kukula. Sasa hata pesa tutatoa wapi jameni?
We really struggle to get even what to eat. So the government should cater for their school fees.
Napenda kujua ni kriteria gani hiyo ametumia ya kufungua grade 4, ya kufungua class 8 na kufungua form 4.
In the statement, schools will be open to grade 4 pupils as well as candidates in primary and secondary schools on Monday, the 12th of October 2020. They shall later on break for a week on 1st of January next year after 11 weeks of vigorous studies.
As teachers, as parents, as education stakeholders, we are in shock. We are even wondering, when he met us at the Kenya Institute of Education around a month ago, 3 weeks ago, he should have just announced on that particular day that schools will open on 12th of October. And he should have given parents a month to plan, to think about it, and to be ready.
The group shall later resume learning on 4th of January, which will mark the beginning of third term, in which after 11 weeks, candidates shall sit their national examinations. KCPE will be conducted between the 22nd and 24th of March 2021, while KCSE will be done in 3 weeks, between 25th of March and 16th of April.
Their psychology is not set for learning right now. By pushing them into school at a short notice like this, you have not prepared them to go to school. You've told them they'll go in January. Now you've pushed it back by another 2 months. It means simply you have interfered with their psychology.
Tuna ule uhakika ya kwamba kweli tunaweza waachilia watoto waende katika mazingira hayo, na haswa wale watoto ambao ni wa madarasa ya chini, haswa hilo darasa la 4.
A number of guidelines have further been presented, with parents being called upon to not restrict their children from going to school.
Most of our children will not report for many reasons. We heard about teenage pregnancies, and one of the big reasons that will cause these dropouts is school fees.
The Ministry of Education has further called upon teachers to offer more support other than catching up with the syllabus. On his part, the Secretary General in the Ministry of Education, Zach Kenodia, has confirmed, as it was listed on the statement, the difficulty that shall be experienced in achieving social distance.
Ile shida kubwa tu na mtaiona hata tukifungua shule zote ni hii mnyama inaitwa social distancing. Kwa sababu sasa hakuna lolote limebadilika, lakini watoto wetu ni wale na pengine wataongezeka.
Lazima waangalie tusipeleke tena watoto tuende mauti.
Ben Kirera, K24 Evening.
A report compiled by Ben Kirira right there, and of course sets the stage for the discussion this morning. My panel very ready, very able to go through this particular discussion. Let me start in studio, joined by Gloria Orobe-Bering, youth policy analyst and expert. Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome to the show.
It's been a minute.
Yes, welcome back.
Asante.
Are we ready to take the kiddies back to school?
I've always been ready.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so no surprises on your end?
No surprises on my end.
Also joined by political analyst and also an educationist as well, Paul Opuko. Good morning.
Good morning, Jeff.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana, Jeff.
Welcome to the show.
Asante.
First reaction when you saw the press?
I'm not sure if I'll echo my sentiments with Gloria, but I think most of the parents were not prepared for this.
Okay.
And I've talked to so many parents on the matter, so I think it's going to be a challenge to these parents. Yes.
Okay. We'll be getting into that in detail. We are also joined on Skype by communication strategist Mark Bichachi. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Jeff.
Welcome to the show.
Asante sana.
Of course, for you, you've already said it time and time again, you homeschool your children, but from a Kenyan point of view, when you saw the press release, were you surprised with the announcement made?
Well, I was not, but I knew he would do something because he said a lot of things in the last 1 month. So that's new and predictable, only predictable thing. But also as the fact that people can chase people to clubs meant a lot of parents, uncles, aunties coming home with the virus anyway. So it only made sense if utilization is possible, that should also, that's was a fact. Secondly, it was psychologically a big toll on our kids. Have them staying, especially when they had exams to sit. I remember my own excitement when I was about to sit in ACC and I was about to be done in the prison called. So there was the psychological toll as well on children that needed to be handled. Now, the issue that we're going to is a lot of parents figuring out where they get money to shop, how they're going to risk.
I'll cut you off slightly, Mark. I think there's an issue with your audio. My team will be looking into that shortly, and then we'll get back to you on that. Let me bring it to studio. John, you said parents aren't prepared, but when you look at most headlines and the posture and what we're getting from the ministry as well, is just trying to save what's left of the academic year. We don't want a case where 2021 we have all of these repetitions going on. So they're trying as best they can to see what they can salvage from 2020. What's your assessment of that?
Thank you, Jeff. I don't know, saving at what expense and maybe at whose expense. Okay, we've all wanted the kids to go back to school, yes. But I think the communication part from the government, I think, had a lot of technical hitch, if I can use that word, because these are people who say that kids are going back around maybe June, July, they say September, all of a sudden they said January. But you see now the eye opener was when the president talked to the nation. And he said that he'll only be convinced to reopen schools when he's really convinced that the curve has flattened. But you see, for him not committing himself in reopening the schools gave that assurance to parents that there's no school this year. And I like what when you mentioned with Mark about homeschooling. I think we are going to have what you call a gap between I'm not saying Mark has it or the haves or maybe he falls on that category of having it, but that gap of haves and have-nots, because we have kids from Mukuru, Kwanjenga, Kibera who even don't understand this thing about homeschooling. So it's going to have that approach, because I can tell you for a fact, most parents are not convinced that these kids are safe in school. You've heard that person who was talking and they saying that tupeleke watoto kwa shule tupate mauti. This is a parent who is not so sure that the government is not enough. Mr. Zak has just said there's going to be a challenge in physical distancing. We've talked about desks. We've talked about infrastructure. Do we have that in place? Has the government done enough? Has they worked to these public schools? You know, I think it's a challenge from the government, and I know they have been doing consultations all time round. But I think having a crash program for 11 weeks, just for them, because of the transition period for the grade 4 candidates and the grade 8 at the parents' expense. We have kids still in the villages. Most of them cannot travel back to Nairobi, you know. And here there's a case, even the transport sector is going to, it will be paralyzed because, you know, they cannot again carry excess. We have parents who have like 4 or 5 kids. So it's going to be a challenge, and giving them 4 or 5 days to prepare, it will be a problem.
Okay, and just for the record, Zaki Nodia, CAS Minister of Education, was supposed to be part of this particular show, had confirmed it as of yesterday. We don't know if it was a change of mind, a change of heart, but he was supposed to be part of this discussion to also shed light as far as the ministry's position in terms of the directive given yesterday. Gloria, you said you were ready for this all along. When you see it playing out now, because very many parents talking about the fact that fees were not up to scratch on that account-wise, you have an issue, and the basic economics of the country is plain to see. When you're given 5 days to do this, even as a ministry, as a parent, is that enough, really?
You know why I said I'm ready? I mean, I've come to this show and several others consistently saying that we should have never closed the schools if we never really had a resiliency plan. Because resiliency planning is when you understand there's a possibility of a disaster or an ongoing disaster. And so you put together a team of stakeholders who are skilled, who have the technical expertise, and then you come up with a plan on business continuity. We don't have that plan. So that's the reason why you see a lot of confusion. In terms of has government really taken that initiative to help us go through this whole pandemic effectively as possible? I mean, we can't say that they had the book in terms of this is what happens when a virus like this comes, because we've never really experienced this kind of pandemic. But what we were at least expecting, say by June, is that the shock and whatever, they would have, you know, put their stuff together and through the stakeholders and those committees that they are forming that are even being paid could have come up with some sort of plan on business continuity. So I think for Kenyans, what's happening is it's almost a disappointment. It's a disappointment that we've been waiting, we've been holding our breaths, we've been putting our masks, sanitizing, staying home with our kids, and then to a point where it's like, oh, we've been doing all this just so they can take these initiatives of opening, you know, giving us 5 days notice and this and that. So for me, the communication has been a challenge. I don't really understand why, because I'm not in government, but I also see that there is lack of synergies with the different departments, whether it's the executive with his cabinet or also with other stakeholders and even the education agencies. The one thing that I've been saying this whole time in terms of education, in terms of business, is we have to become alive to the fact that there's disruption. And there's serious disruption of the education systems that we've put in place. And the realization that there's no turning back, there's no going back, should be something that we should be talking about. For instance, there's a lot of rigidness in terms of reopening of schools, in terms of how the government has chosen to see business continuity in terms of schools after COVID or you know, after the lockdown and everything. That's why we are still talking about we don't have money for uniforms. Why do we need uniforms? That's why we're still talking about we don't have school fees. Of course we don't have school fees because most of the people have lost their jobs. But why are we still talking about school fees when we could have already tried to instigate alternative forms of learning? And I'm not talking about the online platforms. I'm talking about community-based learning. I'm talking about open sources that the government would have partnered with those kind of stakeholders. For instance, we have this agency called Kenya National Qualification Authority. It's an agency under our government doing superb work. What it does, it has a program where it recognizes prior learning experience, prior learning either through either through work experience or through exposure. Maybe your parents have been in agriculture and you grew up in the farm and you learned certain things about agriculture. So what it does is it recognizes that experience and then it tends to certify you or to put a standard in terms of you come here, you sit this exam, and then you then have access into colleges or into universities. But when I look at how the government is responding to now life after COVID, you would expect that our Ministry of Education would look for ways in terms of synergizing with existing government agencies that are already responding to COVID-19. We have high school kids for the last 8 months who were taken back to the village, and they were told you have 8 months to a year until you go back to school. They went into farming. They were taught basic business skills. They were taught basic agricultural skills. Those people have planted, they have harvested, and they have gone to the market, sold, and they have created an income. That should be a sort of recognition of it was not a lost academic year. If that is a Form 2 student who had taken up agriculture, why are we not looking into how we can exempt this student in terms of upcoming exams and things like that? So for me, it's just we need to look into ways to understand. Education sector has been disrupted. And learning does not necessarily mean going to school. Let's stop talking about uniforms. It's completely unnecessary. Let's stop talking about school fees as if we must absolutely learn in those institutions. And let's, evolve.
You're an educationist, John. What do you think informed the decision for the ministry to talk about 5 days, everyone back to school? What do you think brought that about?
I've never been invited in all these forums, but I can tell you the confusion about kids transiting or going to the next class. I think it was going to pose a great challenge because we have a case where we're going to receive so many thousands of kids joining preschool. And then we have kids from grade 8 going into Form 1, secondary. So I think that it was going to be a great challenge. And I think that's where the government had to rush in and try to work on this. To me, that's why I say, 11 weeks is a crash program. You're giving kids maybe a 2, 4, 3 days break, and then Christmas break, you're back to school. And even psychological, these kids were not prepared for this. Mm-hmm. So I think that informed the decision about that backlog in terms of even they didn't want to lose the academic year. And I think that was the major factor. Mm-hmm. But in terms of infrastructure, the ministry has admitted, the ZAC has admitted, they are not prepared about this. It's something that for 8 months they have been there. They know about this thing. I don't know why they're not prepared. They talk about the deaths. They talk about. I don't know if even public schools have received funding. And I think since March, April, they've not been getting funding. We heard about the BM last time. ZAC was about the BM who have not received money. So all this informs the decisions, but at the expense of that child, at the expense of the parent.
Mark, I think we can have you back on even as we inch closer to our first break on the show. And it's an interesting point John has raised, because even as we had a story before we went on, CAS ZAC speaking about the fact that physical distancing is a challenge, especially for children. They don't know how exactly they'll deal with this, yet we are opening up our learning institutions even as we don't know how to deal with this particular challenge. Why the rush? Very many parents asking.
Well, there is 2 reasons why there is a rush. Number one is that the education sector is a major economic driver in this country. If you look at the logistics involved, the bus drivers, if you look at the bazaars, if you look at the cooks, if you look at the watchmen and all the infrastructure and manpower that goes into the education sector, having it lying dormant is actually going to negatively affect the economy. Secondly, we've opened up bars, we've opened up restaurants, we've opened up all manner of entertainment facilities. It does not make sense to open up entertainment and not open up the education sector. Now, this was bound to happen sooner rather than later. And to that extent, we should be glad that people can go back to school, because kids will then not lose a year. But the sheer logistical nightmare that it's going to be, it needs a lot of innovation, which is where I agree with Gloria, where we as a country have excelled
in terms of industrialization. We went and innovated. Now we have companies that are producing PPEs, face masks, hand sanitizers. We innovated in that space. Look at even the media right now. I'm able to attend this show from home. So every other space has innovated. What we've not done is found a way of adequately innovating in the education space. That is what is going to come back and bite us. We need to start looking at the reality of the world today. The world today is not about that you learned something in school, but rather that you had the ability to learn. That is where we need to go, that people today are going to YouTube and they are getting entirely new careers. People are able to study online. People are able to go and do internship and study all new career paths. So we failed in innovating around the education sector and taking advantage of the COVID experience. The COVID experience, for example, made us buy more beds for hospitals, more ICU units for hospitals than we've done since independence. The education sector desperately needs to borrow a leaf and needs to actually innovate in this regard. And parents as well need to learn on how to enhance the education of their children and supplement what the ministry is doing. So this is one space where we failed to innovate as a country, and we desperately and urgently need to do so. And we also, this is a good example of why we should move away from exam-based evaluation. Let us do continuous assessment of our students, because now a student who could have scored an A because of the different economic and social pressures created by COVID-19 could get a B, and yet they've been an A student all through. So we need to actually rethink and innovate around this particular issue, and the fact that we failed to do so only means that a few years from now we will still need to come back and make these decisions again.
Quick rejoinder from Gloria. We have 2 minutes as we get to a break.
Yeah,
so
just a point of correction to Mr. Bichache. We have not failed. The government has failed us. We have a lot of initiatives, and we have people, drivers of these initiatives, who have been wanting to partner with government in terms of the agencies that are there, but the government simply has not opened those doors for them, because I was actually hoping that our CAS, Zach, would come. I have been having so many suggestions when they say that we have a challenge of the social distancing, because they're not thinking outside the box. Why are we not doing shifts? Say Monday, Wednesday, and Friday we have lower primary. Thursday and Tuesday we have upper primary, and vice versa. There are so many examples that are already being used in other institutions, such as churches, such as community gatherings. So we have not failed. Our government has failed to put leadership, which understands that they need to collaborate with people out here who are being innovative.
Okay.
Yeah.
That will lead us to our first break right here on the show as well. We'd love to hear what you think about it. You can hit us up on the WhatsApp number at the bottom of the screen. Of course, a question right now, even as we pose it to you, what additional safety measures should be put in place even as schools reopen next Monday? You can get us on the WhatsApp number at the bottom of the screen. Don't forget, you can get yourself a copy of your People Daily straight to your phone. It's only 10 shillings. The number that you dial is *550*4#. Short break, back with more.